Hello everyone and welcome to the Quickstarter. The Quickstarter is the first chapter I recommend you study because in this chapter you will learn little bits of pieces and information of what you can learn in every chapter. Now, I hope that after studying the Quickstarter, you will already feel ready to start playing the Accelerated Dragon in casual games, such as at your local chess club or in online rapid and blitz games. All right, so let's have a look. So let's say white plays the move e4. This is what our course is centered around. We're going to play the move c5, the Sicilian. Now, white's main move, as you will learn throughout this course, is the move knight to f3. But white also has some other moves. But let's first have a look at the move knight f3. That is the main move that is covered in this course. In the other chapters, you will also learn about other moves, such as a3, b3 as well, also c3. Knight c3 is covered as well, but also setups with f4, so either f4 here, or bishop e2, or d3, or g3. I've tried to cover as much as possible, and also this move knight e2. All right, but let's say white plays the move knight f3, white's main move. White is aiming to follow up with d4 and play the open Sicilian. This is how most people will play against you. Now, my main recommendation is the move knight c6, but we will also have a look at the move g6, the hyper-accelerated dragon. But let's start with the move knight c6. Now here white has some options. White can still play the delayed L-pin with the move c3, but white can of course also play the move d4. In the main core, in the other chapters, you will also find coverage of bishop c4, and knight c3 is covered as well. That will usually transpose to the knight c3 chapter on move 5, because white usually will follow up with d4 anyway. Right after knight c3, we will just play g6, and like I said, white's main move is d4, after which we are back in the knight c3 chapter after knight takes d4. All right, so let's say white goes d4, white's main move. Here we are going to take really the idea of the move c5. Whenever white goes d4, we almost always take. So let's say white recaptures, and here we go g6. And this is really the start of the accelerated dragon. Our goal is to bring our bishop to g7, where it's almost always going to be useful on the long diagonal, and from where we put pressure on the knight. Now white here has two main options. White can either go c4, the Maraxi bind, or knight c3, the other main move. So let's say white goes knight c3, we go bishop g7, and put pressure on white's knight on d4. Now here, in a quick starter, we're going to have a look at bishop e3, but in the course, you can also learn about this move knight takes c6. Here we're going to recapture with the b-pawn, and black gets a very fine game, but you can have a look at that in the 5 knight c3 chapter. All right, so let's say white goes bishop e3, we go knight f6, as you'll learn in the course. This is almost always what we do. We go g6, bishop g7, then knight f6, and often castles afterwards. All right, so here, for the quick starter, I've selected a few moves. The moves bishop c4 and f3, but white also has other options. For example, white can take on c6. This is covered in the 5 knight c3 chapter. We will recapture with the pawn, and you will learn how to play against this move, e5. I mean, just to give you already an idea, we're going to play knight g8, which might seem a bit counterintuitive, but this knight will come back into the game, and the e5 pawn will be a target. So besides knight takes c6, there's also coverage of queen d2, also of bishop e2. I mean, pretty much everything is covered in the 5 knight c3 chapter. All right, so let's say white goes for the move f3, pretty typical move in the dragon. White's aiming to follow up with queen d2 and queenside castles with or without the move bishop c4. But our next move is simply going to be kingside castles. All right, so let's say white goes queen d2, aiming to follow with queenside castles. Bishop c4 is also covered in the course in the 5 knight c3 chapter, and you can learn all about that. Against bishop c4, we play queen b6, and black is already doing well, but like I said, you can learn more about that in that chapter. All right, so let's say white goes queen e2. Now here we go for the move d5, and this is really one of the advantages of the accelerated dragon. We have not played d6 yet, and so we can play d7, d5 in one go. Now for the quick starter, we're going to have a look at knight takes c6, but in the main chapter, you will also learn about queenside castles, e takes d5, but as you will learn, black gets a good game in every variation. All right, so let's say white goes knight takes c6. We're going to recapture with the pawn. And let's say white castles. We're just going to play queen c7 with a very good game for black. We've won a full tempo compared to the normal dragon because we were able to play d7, d5 in one go, whereas in the normal dragon, our pawn would be on d6. And so then we play d5 and we would lose a move. And black is an excellent game here. We have excellent attacking prospects on the queen side. We're going to follow up with rook b8. And these are really the types of positions we want out of the accelerated dragon. All right, so this is this is what we do in case of f3 and queen d2. White can also play bishop c4, a pretty typical move. And here we are going to play kingside castles. Like I said, this is almost always what we're going to do. g6, bishop g7, knight f6, kingside castles. And then we wait and see what white has done. Now white's main move is bishop b3, but in the main course you will also learn about f3, also about kingside castles. In either case, black always gets a good game. For example, after f3, we have queen b6, hitting the pawn on b2, putting more pressure on d4. And to already give you a bit of an idea, after bishop b3, there's knight takes e4. So plenty of traps and ideas to take advantage of the fact that we play the accelerated dragon and not the normal dragon. And like I said, we have a lot of tricks up our sleeve. All right, so let's say white goes bishop b3, the main move. Now here we are forced, here I do recommend that we play the move d6. We're kind of going back into a normal dragon, but by going bishop c4 and bishop b3, white is giving us some additional options. Now here the idea generally will be to go knight g4 and put pressure on that bishop. So white can stop that with the move f3. In the main course, you will also learn about the move h3. That is also covered. But black gets an excellent game there. Here we can go knight a5 and go after the other bishop. All right, so let's say white goes pawn to f3. Now here we go bishop d7. After some consideration, I've decided to make this my main move. And yeah, I recommend that you follow this one. But if you don't like this move for whatever reason, there is also the move queen a5. And you can learn all about that in the 5 knight c3 chapter. All right, so let's say we play bishop d7. White's main move is queen to d2. And here we will trade on d4, white recaptures, and then b5. And black gets an excellent game here. We're generally going to follow up with a5, a4, put a lot of pressure on that bishop. And it's not going to be that easy for white. In case white goes queenside castles, we've already pushed up a lot of pawns on the queen side to create a lot of counterplay. So black has excellent chances here. And like I said, you can learn more about that in the 5 knight c3 chapter. So yeah, like I said, you will see a lot of people going for this setup. It's called the Yugoslav attack, where white goes bishop b3, possibly followed by f3, queen d2, queenside castles with or without bishop c4. But like I said, we have a lot of tricks up our sleeve to take advantage of this setup. All right, so this is really all you have to know for now against 5 knight c3 to start playing it in casual games. White can also go for the move c4, the other main move, the Maraxi bind. Now here, this move is very important to remember. The move I recommend here is the move knight f6. It might seem somewhat counterintuitive because against almost anything else that white does, we are going to follow up with bishop g7, but against the Maraxi bind, I recommend that we play knight f6. And the reason behind that is that after bishop g7, white can go bishop b3, and generally, as you will learn after knight f6, we want to trade on d4, but we want to invite white to recapture with the queen. And here, white will always be ready to recapture with the bishop. So I recommend that we play knight f6, and we attack the pawn on e4. White's main move to defend that is the move knight to c3, and here the move d6. We're now getting ready to trade on d4, and we want to invite white's queen out to the d4 square. In case white plays bishop b3, as you will learn in the Maraxi bind chapter, we now have the move knight g4. And white can easily end up in trouble here. We're aiming to take on e3. If white would be forced to recapture with the pawn, we would not only get the bishop pair, but white would also get a terrible pawn structure with the double isolated pawns on the e file. All right, so white's main move here is the move bishop b2. Then we're going to trade on d4. If white really wants to avoid the trade, there is also knight c2. This is covered in the Maraxi bind chapter. There's, for example, also f3 with the idea to follow with bishop b3. and stopping us from playing knight g4, but you can learn all about that in the Maroczy bind chapter as well. Black also gets an excellent game there. But white's main move is the move bishop e2. Now we're going to trade on d4, and we're going to play bishop g7. So we want to get that queen out to d4, so our bishop is eyeing it on the long diagonal. All right, so white's main move is the move bishop e3, but kingside castles is also covered in the Maroczy bind chapter. But let's have a look. In case white goes bishop e3, we go castles. We now create the positional threat of knight g4, which would attack the white queen, and we would aim to take the bishop on e3, so we would get the bishop pair. So white should move their queen back with queen d2, and now we're going to go a5. The idea is to follow up with a4, queen a5, develop the bishop either to d7 or e6, followed by rook fc8, and black gets an excellent game. You can learn more about that in the Maroczy bind chapter. I've also selected a game in the model game section where you can learn really well how to execute these plans and ideas and how you can score a nice victory with the black pieces. So white's main move is the move castles, then we're going to go a4. And like I said, black gets a very good game here. We're going to follow up once again with queen a5. I'll draw the arrows again. Queen a5, bishop b6, rook fc8, with a really good game for black. And like I said, you can learn more about this in the Maroczy bind chapter. All right, so for now, I think that is enough to start playing the Accelerated Dragon, also against the Maroczy bind. But just really keep in mind that in case white plays c4, play that move knight f6. It might seem somewhat counterintuitive, but it is the right move because once again, after knight c3, we want to play d6 and quickly trade on d4 and bring white's queen out to d4. All right, so this is what we do in case white goes for the Maroczy bind. What white can also do to take advantage of the move knight c6 is the move bishop to b5, the raw Solimo. Now here, since we play the Accelerated Dragon, I recommend that we play g6. We want to go for that kingside fianchetto anyway, as it almost always gives us a good game. Now white can trade on c6 right away, or white can castle. In the raw Solimo chapter, you will also learn about the move c3, aiming to build a big center with d4. But let's have a look at white's two main options, bishop takes c6 and kingside castles. So let's say white goes kingside castles. We're going to go bishop g7, of course. And here white has some options. Let's say white goes c3. With this move, white is aiming to build a big center with d4. You can also learn about rook e1. This is another move. It's a bit of a waiting move. It's waiting to see how we will continue and then proceed accordingly. White can, of course, also trade on c6, but this will transpose to bishop takes c6 on the previous move. We're just going to recapture with the b pawn. All right, so let's say white goes c3, aiming to build a big center with d4. Here I recommend knight f6, developing the knight, hitting that pawn on e4. White's main move is the move rook e1. You will also learn about the move e5 in the raw Solimo chapter. But let's say white goes rook e1. Here we are simply going to play kingside castles. So white generally goes d4. And here an important move to remember is the move a6. By the way, also in the raw Solimo chapter, you will learn about the move h3 if white wants to delay the move d4 a little bit further and make sure that we never have the move bishop g4 in the foreseeable future. All right, but let's say white goes d4. Here we go pawn to a6, challenging that bishop on b5. In the main course, you will also learn what happens in case white drops the bishop back to, let's say, the d3 square. But let's say white trades on c6. Here it's very important that we recapture with the d pawn, and we are not losing a pawn, because in case white trades on c5, we can always trade on d1, and then we get the pawn on e4 with an excellent game for black as we get the pawn back. White has doubled pawns, and we have the bishop pair. So the main move here for white is the move h3, making sure that we don't have the move bishop g4. You can learn all about that in the raw Solimo chapter. But it's also very important to know what to do against the move e5, because you might think like, hey, white's attacking our knight, and maybe they can take on c5 on the next turn. Aren't we losing a pawn? But the answer is no. We have to move a knight d7 to make sure that we protect the pawn on c5. And black gets a pretty good game here. Generally, we will be aiming to trade on d4 and double our pawns. And then we can follow up with knight b6, bishop b6, and try to take advantage of the light squares that white has weakened by pushing up that pawn to e5. All right, so I think for now this is enough to start playing against the Rossolimo. Like I said, against bishop e5, we're going to go g6. And yeah, for now, I think we know enough to start playing against the move kingside castles. But of course, you can learn much more about all of this in the Rossolimo chapter. All right, so white's main move is the move bishop takes c6. And here I recommend that we recapture with the b pawn. Okay, so white's main move is kingside castles, and then we're going to go bishop g7. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this position could be reached through two move orders. White could have also castled on the previous turn and then take on c6, or take on c6 on move 4. All right, so white's main move here is the move rook to e1, a clever waiting move. And here it's not so easy for us to get the desired pawn structure. Generally, what we want to do, and this might seem somewhat counterintuitive, is we want to put the pawns on e5 and d6, as you'll learn in the Rossolimo chapter. But if we go e5 here, white's generally going to aim to blow up our center with c3 and d4. And if we go d6, then white will generally go e5 to give us a weak pawn structure. I will go more on that in the Rossolimo chapter as to how to deal with all of that. So the move I recommend is a waiting move as well. I recommend the move queen c7. So we're waiting for white to show their hand, so to speak. Now white has a few options. For example, you will learn in the Rossolimo chapter that white can play e5, white can play h3, white can play d3, all sorts of waiting moves. White can also play a move like, knight c3. But generally, in case white plays the knight to c3, we will be putting our pawn on e5, because then we no longer have to worry about c3 and d4. All right, but let's say white goes c3, one of their main moves. Now white is aiming to build a big center with d4, and here we will simply play d6. So now, in case white goes e5, we can simply take that pawn. So let's say white goes d4. We're happy now to undouble our pawns. White recaptures, and now we go knight f6. And black already has a very fine game here. We have a nice imbalance. Generally speaking, with this repertoire, I want to give you a repertoire that gives you plenty of chances to fight for the win, and that's also one that's easy to play. And I believe here we get those chances to fight for the win, and also in a way that's easy to play. We're going to follow up with kingside castles, and then afterwards c5, because we want to give our bishops a little bit more scope. And there is the imbalance. We have the bishop pair, so plenty to fight for with the black pieces. All right, so this, I think, is enough to start playing against the Rossolimo. Like I said, we just go g6, and in case white trades on c6, we just recapture with the b pawn, and black always gets a good game. But if you want to go more depth, I highly recommend you check out the Rossolimo chapter. All right, but I think really how you should study this course is just by starting to play it. You don't have to memorize every variation before you start playing it. Just start playing it. If you run into something, go back to the Quickstarter, and then you learn as you go. All right, so let's say we go knight c6. White can, of course, also play the move c3, the delayed Alapin. Now with this move, white is aiming to build a big center with d4 and then recapture with the c-pawn. So here it's very important not to play g6, because if you go g6, then white goes d4, and white gets what they want. White already has an advantage here. So what I recommend is that in case white goes c3, whenever you see c3, we are going to play the move knight f6, challenging that pawn on e4. Because now white doesn't have a super easy way to defend it. I mean, now knight c3 is not available. White can play d3, but that really doesn't make any sense, because white's goal was to play d4. So now, let's say after g6, black gets a pretty good game, followed by bishop g7, castles, and yeah, black is doing pretty well here. All right, so white's main move after c3 and knight f6 is the move e5, pushing our knight away. And whenever white goes e5, we're almost always going to go to the d5 square. All right, so let's say we go knight e5. Now here, white has a few options. For the quick starter, I'm focusing on the move d4, but another big main move for white is the move bishop to c4. And in case white goes bishop c4, as you'll learn, we're almost always going to play knight b6. All right, so let's say white goes d4. Once again, whenever you see the move d4 in the Sicilian, we're almost always going to take. That's really the idea behind the move c5. And let's say white recaptures. And of course, you will also learn about bishop c4 here, turning it into a gambit. But let's say white recaptures. Now we're going to go d6. We want to put a lot of pressure on that pawn on e5 and potentially make it weak. Now, in the L-pin chapter, you will also learn about moves like knight c3. You will learn why bishop e5 is a bad move. But for the quick starter, I'm focusing on white's main move, the move bishop to c4. White's developing the bishop and attacking our knight. Now, what did I say earlier? When white goes bishop c4 in the L-pin, we will almost always respond with the move knight to b6, creating a counter threat on white's bishop. Now, white's main move here is the move bishop b5, but in the L-pin chapter, you will also learn about the move bishop to b3. But let's say white goes bishop b5, creating a pin on our knight. Now we're going to trade on e5. We're generally happy in case white recaptures with the pawn. I feel like black is doing pretty well in these endgames. The pawn on e5 can be a little bit weak. We can now neutralize the pin with bishop d7, and then either follow up with g6, bishop g7, putting more pressure on the pawn, or e6. That's also a good way to develop. So generally, these endgames are pretty good for black. I feel like there's still plenty of pieces on the board to fight for the win. So we're happy to get the queens off. So therefore, white's main move is knight takes e5. And now white is increasing the pressure on our knight on c6. Now here I recommend we play bishop d7, the only good way to neutralize the pin. And white's main move is knight takes d7. We're going to recapture with the queen. And black gets a pretty good game here. We have the imbalance we want. Yes, white has the bishop pair, but white also has an isolated pawn on d4 that we can try to attack later. We're going to follow up with e6, bishop b7, castles, then moving a rook to d8, either the a rook or the f rook, with a good game for black. All right. So yeah, I think this is enough for now against the L-pin, but of course you can learn much more about the L-pin in the L-pin chapter. All right. So, and as you will learn, whether white plays c3 on move number 3 or on move number 2, it will generally lead to the same thing. In case white goes c3 here as well, we will play the move knight f6. So just remember that c3 is going to be met with knight f6. All right, so after knight f3, there is also the move g6. In case you don't like the Rossolimo, which arises after knight c6, bishop b5, this is really white's main move to take advantage of that move knight c6. If these variations do not appeal to you for whatever reason, or you just want to avoid the Rossolimo or just switch it up, I also present to you an alternative in the form of the hyper-accelerated dragon with the move g6. Now, it's very likely that this could transpose to the accelerated dragon after d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, and knight c6, but this also gives white some additional options. For example, after g6, the main options that white has are c3 and d4. You will also learn in the hyper-accelerated dragon that bishop c4 is an option as well. White's generally aiming to follow with c3 and d4 as well, but now we don't have an early d5 push because that bishop is covering that square. All right, so let's have a look. Let's say white goes c3. Now here, once again, white is aiming to build a big center with d4. And here, knight f6 is not so good because white can go e5, knight e5. And here, these variations don't work out as well, as white can follow with a quick d4 and bishop c4. And it just doesn't work out as well in the same way. So I don't recommend knight f6 here. Instead, I recommend that we challenge white's center with the move d5. Because once again, we don't want to allow white to build a big center on a post. Now, in the hyper-accelerated dragon chapter, you will also learn about white's other main move, the move e5. But for the quick starter, I'm focusing on the move e takes d5, as this one is a little bit sharper. So it's really important to know what to do here. In the hyper-accelerated dragon chapter, you also learn that bishop e5 check is a move, but it's not really a concern. We just go bishop d7, and black's doing pretty fine. All right, so let's say white takes on d5. Of course, we're going to recapture. And let's say white goes pawn to d4. We're going to go bishop g7 and just continue our development. Now, white's main move here is the move knight a3, but in the hyper-accelerated dragon chapter, you will also learn about other moves, such as bishop e3, bishop e2, knight b2. There's a lot of coverage of a lot of moves. But let's say white goes knight a3, the critical move. White's aiming to go bishop c4, but also knight b5. So it's really important that we know what to do here. Here we will trade on d4, and let's say white goes knight b5. things can get a little bit scary. White is threatening knight c7 check. Just to give you an idea, in case white goes to bishop c4, we go queen e4, and these variations lead to sharp but exciting play as well, where black also will have some dynamic play. All right, so let's say white goes knight b5. We have to stop knight c7, and the best way to do so is with knight a6, developing our knight as well. Now, white's most popular move is knight takes d4, and then we're going to go knight f6. And I feel like here black is doing pretty fine. We're just going to follow up with kingside castles. In case white plays bishop b5 check, we can just block with bishop d7. And there's still plenty of pieces on the board, and black has plenty of chance to fight for the win. So I feel like this already gives you a good idea as to what you should do in case white meets the hyper accelerated dragon with the move c3. All right. Yeah, so in case they go c3, we're going to go d5, and if they take, we recapture with the queen. But you can learn much more about this in the hyper accelerated dragon chapter. All right, so instead of c3, the other option white has to take advantage of the move g6 is the move d4. Once again, in case white goes d4, we're going to take. And here, white can go knight takes d4, and we go back into the accelerated dragon with knight c6. But white can also play queen takes d4, hitting our rook in a corner, which is a little awkward to deal with. But the only good way to deal with that is the move knight to f6. Now, for the quick starter, I'm focusing on the move e5, the most straightforward, hitting our knight right away. I mean, it's really important to know how to deal with this one. But in the hyper accelerated dragon chapter, you will also learn about the move knight c3. Against knight c3, we're going to play knight c6, which is almost always going to be our next move, developing the knight with tempo. And here white can go queen a4 and then follow up with e5 on the next turn. All right, so let's say white goes e5. We're going to go knight c6 once again, attacking white's queen. White's main move is queen a4, but in the hyper accelerated dragon chapter, there's also coverage of other moves. Let's say white goes knight a4. Here we're going to go knight d5. I mean, as you'll learn in the L-pin, very often our knight is going to go here, and this position is no different. So we're going to go knight e5. White's main move is queen e4, and then we're going to go knight to b6. And generally, we're going to be aiming to follow up with bishop g7 and a quick d5 to quickly bring our pieces to life. So let's say white goes knight c3. We're going to go bishop g7, developing our bishop. Now white's main move here is the move bishop f4. To make it difficult for us to go d5, as now they can take, and their bishop would also protect the d6 pawn. But here we go d5 anyway, striking in the center, because we don't want to wait for white to go queenside castles, as then it's going to be even harder to get that d5 push in. So we go d5 here, white should take en passant, and then we go bishop f5, developing our bishop with tempo as well. Now here, white can take on e7. In the hyper accelerated dragon chapter, you will also learn about other moves, such as what happens when white moves their queen back. But let's say they take on e7. I mean, this is the sharpest move, so this is the move I selected for this chapter. We're going to go queen e7. Black is down 2 pawns, but we get a lot of compensation, a lot of quick play, and so black is doing fine here. Now let's say white goes queen e3. Here, a very important move to remember is the move knight to b4, with the idea to take here, which would fork the king and the queen. So it's really important that white knows what they're doing here. And the best move for white is the move rook to c1. We're going to take on c2 anyway. White should recapture. And yeah, black is doing fine here. Let's say white takes. We're going to recapture. And let's say white goes bishop b5. The main move pinning our queen to our king. It might seem like black is lost at first glance, but fortunately we have to move bishop takes c3, removing the defender of the bishop. White should recapture. Now we're going to take on b5. And let's say white takes on h8. We're going to go king takes e7 with a pretty complicated game, but black is doing fine here. The white king is stuck in the middle as well. So you can learn all about this in more depth in the hyper accelerated dragon chapter, but I hope this already gives you a good idea of the variations, and it gives you the confidence to start playing it in your online games and in your over-the-board games. All right. Okay, so let's have a look. So yeah, I hope this already gives you a good idea against the move knight f3. Like I said, my main recommendation is the move knight c6, but I'm offering you g6 as well as an alternative in case you don't like the raw Solimo. All right, so instead of knight f3, another big move for white is the move knight to c3. And with this move, white is really keeping their options open. They can still follow up with g3, with knight f3, with knight ge2, or develop the bishop. But against knight c3, I recommend the move knight c6. Here, I don't recommend g6 because white can go d4, and after c takes d4, queen takes d4. Here they can transpose to the variations in the hyper-accelerated dragon chapter, with, for example, knight f3, but white also has another option in the form of bishop e3, and white can try to attack on the king side when they follow up with f3, drop the queen back to d2, and queenside castles, and I feel like this is a bit dangerous. So instead, I recommend the move knight to c6, keeping our options open. Very often, knight c6 is just going to be our second move, so it's pretty easy to remember. Now, white has a few moves here. For example, they can go for the move f4, going for the Grand Prix attack, but they can also play the move bishop e5. Like I said in the main course, there's also coverage of all of these other moves, such as g3, going for the closed Sicilian, and knight f3 will probably transpose to the open Sicilian because white will probably follow up with d4. All right, so let's say white goes bishop e5, playing a bit of a mix of the closed Sicilian and the raw Solimo. Here we're going to meet the move bishop e5 with the move knight d4. You will see that shortly as well in the Grand Prix attack when white plays bishop e5 and has knight on c3, we're going to play knight d4. Because then after a potential trade on d4, we can always recapture with our pawn, and then the knight on c3 will be hanging. All right, so in the closed Sicilian chapter, you will also learn about the move bishop c4. There's also coverage of that, but white can also play knight f3, their main move. Here we're going to play a6, kick that bishop away. White's main move is bishop d3, but in the closed Sicilian chapter, you will also learn about the move bishop to c4. Here black gets a fine game as well after the move b5, as black can quickly take over the initiative. But let's say white goes bishop d3. Now here we go for g6, because we want to be able to play our accelerated dragon setup anyway, and fianchetto our bishop on the g7 square. So let's say white castles. I mean, knight takes d4 is covered as well. We're going to go bishop to g7. And let's say white goes rook e1. We're going to go e6. And like it's a pretty fine game here. We're going to follow up with knight e7, castles. We can add some support to the knight on d4 with knight ec6. And we can also follow up perhaps with moves like b5, bishop b7. And in case white trades on d4 early, we can always recapture. And after the knight moves, we can follow up with a quick d5, putting pressure in the center. All right, so I hope this gives you a good idea of what to do in case white combines knight c3 with bishop b5. Like I said, you can learn more about this in the closed Sicilian chapter, but this already gives you a good idea, and so you can already just start playing it in your online games and in other casual games as well. All right, so let's say white goes f4, going for the Grand Prix attack. White's aiming to follow up with knight f3, followed by bishop c4, bishop e5, and then kingside castles, and try to attack on the king side. Often white would like to trade on c6, then maybe go d3, maybe queen e1 to h4, and really just get that attack going on the king side. Now here we go g6. Once again, we go for our favorite setup with the kingside fianchetto. White will generally play knight f3. We will go bishop g7. Now here white's main move is bishop e5, but in the Grand Prix chapter there is also coverage of the move bishop to c4. But here, generally, as you will learn throughout the course, in case white puts their bishop on c4, we are going to play the move e6. Neutralize that bishop on that diagonal, and we're going to follow up with knight e7, followed by a quick d5 push. So black's already doing pretty well here, but let's say white goes bishop e5, the main move in the Grand Prix attack. We are going to play knight to d4. Like I said, in case white trades on d4, we're going to recapture. Now that knight is hanging, it's a little bit awkward for white to deal with. So white's main move is the move kingside castles. And here we're going to go a6. Ask white's light square bishop where it is going. Now white can drop the bishop back to d3, but here we are going to play the move pawn to b5. So we're gaining space on the queen side. We can follow up with bishop e7, and black is doing very fine here. So you can learn more about this in the Grand Prix chapter, and I've also selected a really nice game in the Model Games chapter where black just blew white off the board. So check out the Model Games chapter. It's, I believe, the last game in that chapter. And check out the Grand Prix chapter as well. All right. So yeah, I hope this gives you a good idea as to how to deal with the Grand Prix. Like I said, we can just go for our normal setup. And whenever white plays bishop e5, we're going to play knight at d4. All right. So instead of that, white can also play the move bishop c4. And you will see this a lot at lower levels when people like playing the Italian or perhaps the bishop's opening against e4, e5. But against the Sicilian, this move is not effective at all because we have not played e5 yet. This diagonal is not that open for the bishop, and we can often put that pawn on e6 to neutralize the bishop on the a2, g8 diagonal. But first, we're going to play knight c6. This is very often going to be our second move against a lot of things white does, just not against the yellow pin. Now, let's say white here goes knight f3. Now we're going to play pawn to e6. So we're neutralizing that bishop. Let's say white goes kingside castles, and now we're going to play knight f6, developing the knight, hitting the pawn on e4. And in the course, you will also learn about moves such as d3. Black gets a fine game there. So knight c3, there's knight takes e4 anyway. Just to show you real quick, we can take, because then after takes, there's d5. And we have a nice counter fork on the bishop and the knight, winning our piece back with a good position. White's main move is the move rook e1. By the way, against d3, we will also go d5. That's very often going to be our next move. But let's say white goes rook e1. Now we have a nice little tactic with knight takes e4. Because if white takes, we go d5. And now we are going to get the bishop pair as we fork the bishop and the rook. Let's say white takes, we're going to recapture. And black has a very fine game here as we have the bishop pair and there is a slight imbalance. For example, if white goes knight c3, we can just drop our queen back to d8. We're going to follow up with bishop e7, castles, and black is doing pretty well. All right, so this was the quick starter guide. I hope this gives you a good idea as to what to do against every variation that white can throw at us. I hope that I gave you little bits and pieces of information, and this really gives you the confidence to start playing it in your online games at your local chess club. And yeah, like I said, just play the Accelerated Dragon, learn as you go. If there's anything you run into that you don't know, go to the chapter, learn more about the variation, play it again, and that way you get better as you go along. I don't recommend that you learn the entire course and only then you play it. Just start playing it. Like I said, the Quickstarter should already give you a good idea, and you will just learn as you play the opening. So best of luck. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask them, and I'll be more than happy to guide you through this opening.